good to go. Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. If you don't know who these gentlemen are right here, this is, oh my God. This is Joel Griffin. I know, this is terrible. And then, this is David Kerr. He is a professor at VCU, and he kindly agreed to come up here and do this forum for us. So, we'll just give them all a nice welcome. Oh yeah, he's going to read all about the rules too, so you'll have a clear idea about how this forum's going to operate tonight. And then we got John in here, and he's doing all the video stuff, so we're good to go. Okay, enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One of the things we were having a little challenge with getting started this evening was finding a quarter for a coin toss. And I didn't be changing my car. I usually just kind of siphon it off at McDonald's in the morning. I had a penny in the car. So of course Suzanne let me, no, Christine, let me the quarter. So
That's Suzanne, I'm Christine.
Yes, ma'am. We'll be tossing for the order of go. This magic quarter. Some of you'll see that it's same, different on each side. Okay. We just like to do this a little special. I understand that sometimes even in the national debates they toss coins. So we know they do it in Super Bowl, right? Now, I was introduced as being from down at VCU, and I do teach at VCU, teach political science, and I enjoy it a great deal. I teach freshmen, and I teach older students, and I can't tell you how delighted I was that one year to have a student who was 64 years old. And I'm like, all right. Somebody who heard Watergate. But most of them are about as old as my shoes. About 19 years old. And I don't really live that far from here, actually. I live off of Poplar Road, Stefaniga, up towards Seven Lakes. So I'm not far from here. About 18 minutes, and I had to wait for the time to start to come in because I underestimated it. It was about 20 minutes away. So I'm a local. I used to serve on the school board years ago, and so yeah, it's my hometown. Oh, this I'm David Kerr, and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's forum for the Democratic candidates for the Democratic nomination for the 27th Senatorial District of Virginia. We have two candidates, Joel Griffin. Joel, make sure you know who you are. Ben Litchfield. And we certainly welcome them here to this event. This is a big district, and I know these candidates have been working hard for months to spread their message far and wide. I've seen lots of evidence of that. For that, their ideas and their energy, I'd like to begin by thanking them both for their commitment to the democratic process. Thank you, gentlemen. And most of all, Ben and Joel, thank you for being here tonight. We appreciate it. I would like to begin this evening with a short quote from one of my heroes, Winston Churchill, on democracy. It's one of the first slides I used in my freshman political science course, and it, I think sums up the whole challenge of democracy rather well. This is 24-point type. I'm using glasses. Many forms of government have been tried and will be tried in this world of sin and woe. No one pretends that democracy is a perfect or all-wise system. Indeed, it has been said that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all those other forms that have been tried from time to time. Mr. Churchill, with his typical candor and humor, is right. In these times when democracy itself is under threat, what we're doing now tonight is an exercise in one of the most basic forms of democratic governance, democratic with a small d, namely a community candidates forum. In a very real sense, by being here in this forum, we're standing up for democracy. The rules tonight for this debate, it's not a debate, which is a forum where we are all comparing ideas, is as follows. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to make opening remarks. We'll toss a coin in just a moment to determine who goes first. Call it, and you're first. That's pretty much the way we'll run it for the rest of the evening. Sure. And then we're going to go to questions, where you'll have 2 minutes to respond to questions. We have a lot of questions. 2 minutes to respond to questions. We have a lot of questions. This group was not short on ideas about what they wanted to ask you. So you will be tested. So the questions are outstanding, by the way. And so this will be a very enlightening evening. Now, I don't want this to sound ominous, but you will be monitored. For time.
Are you doing both?
And, Christine standing by with the time.
Suzanne.
Suzanne. Hi, Suzanne.
Hi.
Suzanne has two cards. One is yellow, which means caution. You got 30 seconds to go. And red is hard stop. That's what we used to say as a member of the FAA. That is a hard stop. United 377. And I'm sure you've been to enough of these events to know how that works. So I will go ahead and we'll toss the coin, and I will move my get the questions lined up over here because we'll go right after you start. There we go. All right, I can't toss coins from my phone. I have fun. I'm going to do my best. It's not meant to be the quarterback who does this in the Super Bowl. All right. Let's see. Heads. And tails. Cool. Bird. Okay. You're up. And just go ahead and bring the microphone a little closer to you.
Not sure I was. We need to be this.
Yeah.
I think you can remove that if you'd like to. I think it'll come off the stand.
I'm okay.
You're okay? All right.
Sure. Not sure where my timer is, so.
I'm
Right here. She's
Oh, you're ready to hit start when I go?
Whenever you start, I will
All
set
right.
the button.
And it's Suzanne.
Yes.
And it's
Suzanne. It's Christine.
Yes.
I'm David.
My name is Joel Griffin. I'm honored to be here this evening. It's good to see very familiar faces, and for those that don't know me, I wanted to thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate in this forum. My journey to running for state senate to even be here is an unlikely one. I was raised in rural North Carolina, growing up in a family that relied on manufacturing jobs, meant we lived paycheck to paycheck. With two working parents, I spent a lot of free time going to the public library, and this set the foundation for the rest of my life. I left home at 14 and jumped from couch to couch, relying on a network of coaches and teachers to help me navigate high school, and after graduating, I joined the Marines. After 8 years of service and with a degree from Penn State, I went on to a career in government contracting. Later, I founded Griffin Group, and today I own 9 small businesses in Fredericksburg, employing over 100 people. I'm a staunch community advocate, having served on boards and committees in the region for over a decade. While I'm proud of the work we've done in the community, my heart is with my family. My beautiful wife Jennifer is in the back there. We've been together for 25 years, and we have 2 beautiful daughters, Gwyneth and Ainsley. As some of you know, in 2012, we lost our oldest daughter, Gwyneth, when she was just 13. She had a heart attack at school, and the staff had not been trained on how to provide CPR, nor how to defibrillate her on campus, either of which could have saved her life. We do miss her very much, but my wife and I turned our grief into action in Virginia. We wanted to make sure that parents wouldn't have to go through what we went through. And in 2013, we worked with the General Assembly to pass Gwyneth's law requiring defibrillators in high schools, CPR training for teachers and high school seniors. In 2015, we founded our nonprofit Gwyneth's Gift to carry on the mission of the community. And today we know of 10 lives that have been saved because of Gwyneth's Gift. As we look to November, nominating the right candidate in the Democratic primary is critically important. We all know how much is at stake this fall in the elections for the Senate. I got into this race because we need experienced leadership, and I believe I'm the right person for the job. We are very fortunate that we have 2 great Democrats as candidates, but only one of us can win in November. Throughout my career, I have served and will continue to deliver on the critical issues we face as a Commonwealth. I'm thankful for Senators Dick Sasslaw, Mimi Logg, and Scott Servell for their endorsements, as well as former candidate Luke Wright for his endorsement. He's recently joined our team. As the next state senator for District 27, I intend to do everything in my power to ensure that we enshrine a woman's right to choose in the Virginia Constitution, to defend our teachers and our students, and I'll use my years of involvement fighting for continued economic development in our region. Virginia's 27th is the most critical seat for holding the Democratic majority in the state Senate. I hope you will support my campaign, whether it's knocking doors or making phone calls. It all certainly helps. Thank you, followers who are on Democrats. I look forward to working on your behalf as your next state senator. Thank you.
Good evening, Suzanne. Keep me honest.
Yeah, I will.
All right. Well, good evening. My name is Ben Litchfield. I want to start off by thanking the Falls Run Democratic Club and the Celebrate Action Network for this amazing event. I'm the former chairman of the Stafford County Democratic Committee. I held that position for 4 years, and in 4 years we elected good Democrats like Senator Tim Kaine, Mark Warner, and President Joe Biden. When I took over as Stafford Dems chair, we had 7 Republicans on our Board of Supervisors, and when I left, there were 3. I built a broad-based coalition of parents, teachers, and educators to pass a sweeping anti-discrimination policy in Stafford County Public Schools through a Republican-leaning school board, protecting LGBTQ students and staff from discrimination. This policy is so popular that MAGA Republicans and their extremist enablers in Richmond cannot repeal the policy today. I worked with delegates Elizabeth Guzman and Jennifer Carroll Foy to write legislation protecting tenants that has curbed one of the worst eviction crises in the Commonwealth's history. I'm a consumer protection lawyer. I got my start at the National Credit Union Administration writing rules and regulations, cracking down on payday lenders, making credit more accessible to working families, and expanding credit union membership. I've advised Congress on some of the most sweeping, intricate legislation in this country's history. I worked at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, taking on some of the largest financial institutions in the world. I've held the biggest banks accountable for discriminating against working families, preying upon our disabled veterans, repossessing cars as parents were putting their children in their car seats, and exploiting our teachers. I'm running for state senate because Richmond does not work for working families. Unemployment claims go unpaid for months, if not years. I just had a constituent reach out to me this week asking about his unemployment check, and it turns out that a third-party vendor is the cause. Our Virginia Employment Commission knows about it, but won't do anything because they don't have the funding and they don't have the resources. I think that those kind of breakdowns in our social safety net, those breaking of our promises to each other, are unacceptable, and I'm going to Richmond to clean it up. I'm proud to be endorsed by delegates Candy King and Sam Rasool, by Stafford County School Board members Maya Guy, Sarah Breeden Chase, and Elizabeth Brandon Warner, by Spotsylvania School Board member Nicole Cole, by the Virginia chapter of the National Association for Women, by Run for Something, and by several other national organizations. I look forward to a spirited debate on the issues. Thank you for this evening. Let's get to work.
Thank you very much for those outstanding introductory remarks. Let's start with questions. First one has to do with the economy. In fact, there's a whole series that bounced on very different topics: the economy, human rights, rural development, and I'm going to try to pick one from each as we go down, and as long as the evening allows us. What are your thoughts about Virginia being a right-to-work state? How would you define the term? And do you support the right-to-work philosophy? You are the first.
Oh, sure. I've been an employer and an employee my entire life. As an employer, I understand the demands that we have for qualified workforce. As an employee, I understand that there's a need for us to have equal rights for employment, whether that's as teachers with NEA, whether that's union labor, equal protection of OSHA for all of our employees. So I do believe in right to work. I believe it's an issue that we need to look heavily at. It's certainly something that, in many cases, it needs to be repealed. I've met with labor. I've met with teachers. I've met with any number of workers who are not provided affordable living wages, and I want to make sure that all of the employees in the district and across the Commonwealth as a state senator are afforded those rights and those protections under the law.
Thank you. Right to work is a union-busting tactic that was passed as part of a sweeping raft of Jim Crow legislation designed to break the economic power of our black brothers and sisters. I have pledged to repeal right to work as the next senator from the Fredericksburg region. Union strength built the middle class. President Biden said so himself, and they will do so again, and we will do it by repealing right to work. Michigan has repealed right to work already, and I don't see businesses fleeing Michigan right now. I see them investing. I see them rebuilding manufacturing in this country. I see them investing in American workers. The Chamber of Commerce and their enablers in Richmond will foist all sorts of hobgoblins and parades of horribles, telling us that if we repeal right to work, business will flee from Virginia. We have the best workers, we have the best universities, we have the best resources. Businesses will invest here. We do not need right to work. I will vote to repeal it. I pledge that to you now, forever. I will champion the repeal of right to work.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next question has to do with the issue of human rights. What laws are you going to support to keep abortion, the morning after pill, the birth control legal, and birth control legal for all childbearing women?
All right.
So we'll fall back and forth then.
Yeah.
All right. Early on in my campaign, I made a public pledge to codify Roe versus Wade and Griswold versus Connecticut into the Virginia Constitution, protecting the right to abortion access, as well as protecting the right to safe, affordable contraceptive care. I also think we need to go further. Right now, we're seeing an alarming spike in maternal mortality rates. My dear friend Jessica passed away from complications from childbirth. I think we need to do more to make sure that prenatal care is affordable. We need to make sure that women who decide to get pregnant and have children have access to health care, and that our babies are born healthy. So I look at reproductive freedom across the spectrum, both protecting abortion access, but also protecting the right to have children if you want them.
Ben and I are in violent agreement on this, that we must protect a woman's right to choose. We must enshrine that right in the Virginia Constitution, and we make sure that, without question, that a woman's right is protected. I'm also a believer that we need to go further. I agree with Ben on this as well. We need to make sure that a woman has full access to medical services so that she can make an informed decision. We need access to sexual education, reproductive protection measures, Plan B, condoms, any variety of services that we can provide into our communities to make sure that unplanned pregnancies are addressed early before they happen. We need to make sure that sex education becomes part of our student curriculum again, making sure that students can make informed decisions for themselves. Unequivocally, a woman's right to choose must be protected. This affords us equality under the law. Equality for half of our citizens, ensuring that the protections that we provide and that we enshrine in the legislature are things that will protect against other questions of choice of religion, choice of sexual identity, things that we must protect against legislators and being involved and making decisions that are frankly between that individual and their doctor to make those choices.
Again, thank you very much for those excellent answers. I'd like to ask, this is one of the questions in our questions, which are really good. What will you do to address the homeless population, and specifically, what will you do with regard to affordable housing?
So, affordable housing is something that I do think that we can play a role in the state legislature. I think that we can create policies that, as developers are building new homes, new developments in the region, that we can require them to offer up affordable housing. And I want to make a distinction between subsidized housing and affordable housing. Subsidized housing is government subsidized housing, and I mean affordable housing such as apartments, condos, townhomes that our teachers, our Marine lieutenants, our police officers, they can afford to live in the communities that they serve. We need to make sure that is done, and at the state level, in the legislature, we can ensure that through those creating policies for those developers. I would also say that the homeless situation is something that comes from Stafford and Spotsylvania, and it dramatically affects Fredericksburg. These are individuals that in many cases have substance abuse issues. Several of them are veterans. Many of them have mental health issues. So rather than chastising them, we need to embrace them. We need to make sure that they have the protections and the services that they need within our community. It's our responsibility to take care of all of our community members to ensure that they can have access to free medical services. If they need mental health services, that we expand our legislative support and our funding for those medical services within our community so that they can get what they need. And then also, as the founder of a nonprofit, I know inherently how important it is for the nonprofits in our region to be able to feed and house and shelter and clothe some of these individuals. We need to make sure that these people are not chastised for their current situations, but we also provide them with the necessities that they have to maintain decency.
So I agree with everything Joel just said. It's a nice kind of forum where we can agree with one another on most things. I do think on housing policy, I see these two issues as separate but interrelated. I think on the affordable housing front, obviously I support creating incentives for developers to set aside affordable housing, but I think that we can go further. The Virginia Housing Trust Fund is the primary source of funding for our affordable housing providers, like Habitat for Humanity. Fully capitalizing the Housing Trust Fund will ensure that those organizations can keep building houses, can keep purchasing distressed properties and rehabilitating them. I also believe that we need to incentivize localities to set up land banks that can purchase blighted or distressed properties and rehabilitate them for affordable sale. We can also invest in community land trusts. We have these tools in the toolbox already under the Virginia Code. We just need to create incentives for localities to use them. I also believe that we can create incentives where it makes sense for the development of accessory dwelling units, and I'm a big supporter of inclusionary zoning. On the homelessness front, there's an organization in Fredericksburg that is doing fantastic work, Micah Ecumenical Ministries. Megan Cotter is doing fantastic work, creating what she called a Jeremiah community of townhomes where homeless residents in Fredericksburg can live. And what her vision is to have supportive services on site so that these individuals who are chronically homeless can receive the treatment that they need and can continue to be productive citizens. I think that we need to look at taking what Megan is doing and making it statewide policy. We need to invest in plans like the Jeremiah community, and we need to see them as templates for addressing the homelessness problem in our region.
Thank you very much. Next question concerns education. Educators in public schools are one of the most underpaid professions and have a great deal of responsibility for educating our children. What are your plans to lessen this burden?
So, I think that Fredericksburg, Stafford, and Spotsylvania have somewhat unique issues, and we have to address them in different ways. In Stafford County, we're losing teachers to Northern Virginia, so we need to change cost to compete so that we pay our educators comparable wages to what they're seeing in counties like Fairfax, Prince William, and Arlington. We also need to invest in building new schools. I was talking to school board member Maya Guy the other day, and she was saying that we are growing at about 600 students a year, which is roughly the size of an elementary school. We need significantly more funds in the school construction fund in order to build schools. In Fredericksburg, the funding formula actually disadvantages the city. The city has a predominant number of Title I schools, which are high-need schools, and they speak over 31 different languages in Fredericksburg city schools. They have unique issues, but right now the state funding formula disadvantages them, so they're receiving less money than Fredericksburg and Stafford and Spotsylvania, excuse me. In Spotsylvania, I think one of the big problems is what we've seen Glenn Youngkin's plan for the rest of Virginia schools. Banning books, politicizing our teachers, politicizing instruction, dismantling one of the most productive, effective ways of addressing poverty and inequality, which is our public school system. So obviously I believe that our educators across the board deserve higher pay. I would address that in different ways for each locality. I believe we need more funding for school construction, and I believe we need to stop fighting the culture wars in our public schools.
Our public schools are not the public schools that we went to. They are being used as part of the culture wars that have been referenced. Our students are being used as stigmatisms. Our teachers are being chastised. 2 years ago, we were calling them heroes for maintaining us through COVID, and now we're throwing them under the bus because parents don't have a right to say. I'm married to a woman who was a teacher in Stafford County for 17 years. And I will tell you, there's been many a nights where we sat in the classroom waiting on parents to show up for parent-teacher conferences, and the parents didn't show. This was her time away from the students that she had to put in extra time away from parents who never showed. So don't give me one moment where parents don't have a say in what they want to do in school. So if parents don't want their kid to read a book, tell the librarian, put that in that kid's file, and that kid doesn't check that book out. But Burning to Kill a Mockingbird? Are you kidding me right now? To Kill a Mockingbird, which represents an entire generation for us. This is not something that we should be tolerating. I will tell you that we need to identify funding to increase teacher pay. Teachers are the bedrock of our communities. If you don't have an educated society, you run the risk of losing your entire democracy. We must defend our public schools. We must defend our teachers. I would put forward legislation. It would increase the funding for schools through increased development, increased use of some of the programs that are coming to our very own district. We must protect our schools at all costs. Thank you.
Very good. Well on track.
Yeah.
This one's a hot topic. What laws would you
They all are, Dave. Come on.
what laws would you introduce to end the proliferation of guns in the Commonwealth? Waiting periods, closed gun show loopholes. Want to see your ideas?
All right, no stop, Dave. You'll do that. Listen, as a Marine, I will tell you, I know specifically what these weapons of war can do, and I know that there's no place in our communities for them. We must immediately cess the production of all of the automatic weapons. We must immediately close gun show loopholes. We must end the ability for people to produce ghost guns. This is legislation that we can do right away. This is legislation on day one. We need to also enforce the current legislation that's on the books. There's a tendency for pro-gun sheriff departments to ensure that they pick and choose which laws that they want to enforce, and that's not something that we can tolerate. If the laws are on the books, they need to be enforced. So, emphatically, I'm for banning assault rifles in our communities. I'm also for increasing the school safety to ensure that people that shouldn't have access to these weapons don't have easy access to our children. As importantly, we need to make sure that for those citizens who are buying weapons, that we increase our background checks, that we increase the testing for individuals. You should be able to test on a weapon before you are able to use it. When I was a Marine, they didn't just hand me a rifle and say, go forward. I practiced on that weapon for a week. I had to assemble, disassemble, clean it. I had to use the weapon long before I fired it. So this is not something that we currently require. So if you're a gun owner, you need to make sure that they are proper in their use of the weapon, and that they have the skills necessary if they're going to own a weapon, and that the necessary protection measures are in place for those that don't need a weapon.
Everything Joel said. No, seriously, I think that the gun violence epidemic in our country is killing our children and our family members at alarming rates, and our obsession with guns has become unhealthy. I, with Joel, support the ban on assault weapons. I would limit high-capacity magazines so that armed shooters cannot do mass harm, like we've seen in Uvalde and other places like that. I would require safe storage in the Commonwealth of Virginia so irresponsible gun owners don't have their children getting access to their weapons and shooting their teachers. And I would go after the domestic terrorists like the one in Allen, Texas, who thought it was right to shoot up little children. This is unacceptable. I'm a proud gun owner. I learned to shoot a weapon by my father in the middle of the woods in Massachusetts. He taught me it is a tool that can kill someone if mishandled. I follow the sportsman code. I clean my weapon, I use it responsibly, I use it for sport. We need to address gun violence in this country. Like Joel, I support everything he said. I support banning assault weapons. I support limiting high-capacity magazines. I support safe storage. I support banning ghost guns, closing gun show loopholes, waiting periods, extended background checks. We can do these things. We should not be afraid to do these things. The Second Amendment does not prohibit these things, regardless of what a few activist judges on the Supreme Court have to say.
Thank you very much. This question is something of a follow-on. It may involve short answers since you might have already answered them, but I want to conclude it. Virginia has been designated a pipeline of illegal gun distribution to New York City, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Boston, and other areas of the country, going west and south. How would you go about stopping that? Just thinking, you know.
Smoke coming out of these. No. See, I think that there are a few ways that we can do that. Extended waiting periods so that you can't purchase a weapon and then take it immediately up to another state. I also think that registration of weapons is a good way to make sure that we know how weapons are moving in interstate commerce and around the Commonwealth. There are 2 states right now, I know, New York being one of them, that require registration, and in fact, bullets will be encoded with the registration number of the weapon so that we know who shot the bullet, we know who the weapon belongs to, we can track it, and we can hold individuals who commit acts of gun violence accountable. I think that these are actually pro-law enforcement measures. They aid our police and our first responders because they can get these weapons off the street, they know where they are, they can get them out of the hands of gang members, and it makes it easier to enforce our laws. So I believe that we should register weapons, we should have waiting periods, and that we should also have serial numbers stamped onto bullets when they fire, much like what they do in New York.
There are weapons being used against our Customs and Border Patrol officers along the Texas border right now that come from our state. There are Mexican cartels that are fighting drug wars in Mexico using weapons that come from our state. Registering the weapon, reducing the amount of weapons that an individual can purchase, tracking where those weapons go. These are simple measures, relatively straightforward measures that, unfortunately, in today's environment, any arguments made to track a weapon or register a weapon are opposed by our Republicans. And I can't for the life of me seem to understand why. Over 75% of American citizens agree with common sense gun reform. We have 2 candidates here who are willing to go in November to Richmond and make legislative actions on day 1 that would be common sense gun reforms. These are things that are not complex, yet we're fighting ideology. We're not fighting a bureaucracy that's broken. We're fighting legislative agendas. We're fighting politicians who are looking to win over their voters. So that's something that we have to change in terms of getting more Democrats elected in order to affect these changes. And once we do that, then all of the policies that Ben suggested, the policies that I've suggested, these are things that, again, most Americans want, and we have to enact this legislation. Thank you.
You did a great job.
Next time we need 2 of these.
We will work on that. There were 2 points, unfortunately. The next question deals with immigration, and I wanted to ask what laws you would introduce to protect the human rights of undocumented individuals.
So again, this is a cultural war. We are being shown every night on television that immigrants are bad, and the last time I checked, we're a nation of immigrants. We came here wanting something better, and the people who are coming here across the border, majority of them simply want a better life. We are offering that here in Virginia. There's an open spot in every window. There's a for hire sign in every window. These are people who are looking for jobs. We have jobs. We need these people in our workforce. They should also be treated with dignity. They should also be afforded the same protections as every other worker. We've talked to labor who talked about stolen wages. We've talked to labor about the fact that these people are afraid to show up to work because they're going to be raided and separated from their families. We need to make sure that there's a pathway to citizenship for these immigrants. They are here. We are not going to round them up. We're not jackboots. We're not going to burn books. We're not going to pull people from their homes and away from their families. That's not who we are in America. We need to make sure that these people are afforded rights, that they are incorporated and created a pathway to success for their own citizenship. They are not chastised for attempting to become citizens. They need to be incorporated into our workforce in a manner in which they are also paying their taxes just like everyone else. And I've talked to many of these workers in my restaurants who apply for jobs, and we talk about, we can't hire you because you don't have the appropriate documentation. And the first question out of their mouth is not, I don't want to be here. The first question is, how do I get the proper documentation? What do I need to do in order to get a job? And so that's what we should be offering as a community, and making sure that there is a pathway for them to become citizens and be productive workers in our jobs.
So I think it's important to look at what's happening right now in Florida, because that's what's going to happen here in Virginia if we don't stop the Republicans in November. Effective July 1, there's a law that makes it a felony to employ an undocumented immigrant. It makes it a felony to live with an undocumented immigrant, and it makes it a felony to seek work if you are an undocumented immigrant. Glenn Youngkin, in his desire to be president, would salivate to pass these DeSantis laws in Virginia, enabled by his friends in the General Assembly. My first experience with an undocumented individual in Stafford was when a teacher reached out to me asking for help about a student with an ADHD problem. And it turned out that the student was a dreamer and couldn't get access to health care. She wasn't getting medical treatment. I believe that regardless of your immigration status, you should have access to health care if you cannot otherwise afford it. We should be extending FAMIS so that undocumented children who through no fault of their own came to this country have access to health insurance. I also believe that they should receive in-state tuition. I think we should go further with some of the laws that we've built under our democratic trifecta. We have driver's licenses for undocumented folks, but the problem there is that they're different from actual driver's licenses. They're called driver privilege cards, which if you're stopped by ICE, easily allows ICE to identify you as someone who's undocumented, round you up, and deport you. And I do think we need to address the elephant in the room. I do not believe that we should be using state resources, particularly our overburdened law enforcement, to enforce our broken federal immigration laws.
Thank you very much. Next question is a little bit slightly different. It has to do with transportation. And I'm going to ask the question of, do you support the implementation of a regional transportation authority? What would the RTA, that Regional Transportation Authority, look like? What authority would it have? And who would be a part of the membership?
So yes, I do support the creation of a regional transportation authority. I think it would look very similar to FAMPO, which is the Fredericksburg Area Metropolitan Planning Organization. I believe that its composition should be elected officials or boards of supervisors. Although FAMPO has had some drama of late in regional planning, I do think that an organization like a regional transportation authority, particularly if we give it taxing authority, should be politically accountable to the people. And the people who are closest to the people are our local supervisors. I think that we've talked a long time about a regional transportation authority. It's overdue. We're giving up smart scale funding because we don't have one. We're losing federal transportation dollars because we don't have one. Bottom line, we're leaving money on the table because a few stubborn folks won't support our legislators, like Delegate Joshua Cole, who have been fighting for a regional transportation authority for years.
I also agree that we need a regional transportation authority. However, I do not agree that we need to have representation by the supervisors. There are a number of individuals who have a lot of experience with transportation, and these are individuals that can help guide the direction of what those regional transportation organization should be focused on, as well as where those resources go. I've been a member of the FAMPO board for a couple of years now, and I will tell you that there are a number of initiatives that we can work on outside of focusing our funding on adding additional lanes to I-95. First and foremost, funding for secondary roads, north and southbound roads that will allow citizens who live in our community who don't need to get on 95 but simply want to go from Stafford to Spotsylvania without having to get on 95. They should have secondary roads that they can traverse. This is where I think the RTA should be focused. This is where I think they should be spending a lot of their time and energy on designing where those go. Secondly, we have a dedicated passenger rail coming to our region. That rail will afford individuals who live in our community to make the commute north and south with an alternative source of transportation. We are going to be dealing with this growth in our region, so in addition to the rail system as an alternative, we also need to identify additional parking for all of the residents who are continuing to use that transportation system. Lastly, I will say that transportation in this area has been the worst in the country, and my intention is that when I'm in Richmond in November, I'll be the first in line and the one standing on the table saying there should be no discussion about where the money for transportation in Virginia goes. It should be coming right here.
This question is actually a very close follow-on to the prior one. It was made particularly poignant to me as I go down my normal route to Stefanica Road to Poplar, which is just that way, going to get to Trust Road. And there's a particular dip that hasn't been repaired in a year and a half. Where if you make a slightly wrong angle, you'll be visiting your local auto dealer for your alignment to be repaired, as I have done. So with that in mind, and I'm speaking specifically to your role as a state senator when you're elected, what would you do to bring more state and federal funding for local roads and repair of local roads?
That's a perfect segue from my previous answer. So we've had the nation's worst traffic for over a decade. We've also been one of the fastest growing regions, not only in the Commonwealth, but in the nation since the 1970s. Yet we continue to have to wait in line for money to be spent on our road projects. If we're the worst in the nation, and our governor really wants to make a difference, that's where he should be spending his time and his energy on making sure that we get the funding that we need for our road projects. But moreover, transportation projects take decades, sometimes 20, 30 years to implement. We need to have the RTA authority for ourselves so that we can invest in our secondary roads. We need to also ensure that as new developments come online, that they are providing the resources for how they can help solve some of those transportation issues. Developments are not necessarily a bad thing, but they do add additional burdens on our schools and our roads, and we need to make sure that there's a way that we can address that. Businesses in our region can also help with that. One of the projects that we talked about is the data center initiative in Stafford County, which will generate hundreds of millions of dollars that could provide for additional funding for some of our state projects, particularly in the district, as well as revenue for initiatives like bike paths that can be connected. Right now there's bike paths from Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania, and Stafford, but none of them are fully connected because of local politics. So these are things that I think we can work at the state level to help create opportunities for people to use not just their cars, but other forms of transportation.
So most transportation projects in the Commonwealth of Virginia are typically funded by Smart Scale because VDOT has responsibility for the roads in the counties. As state senator, I think it's important to emphasize how closely divided our Senate is going to be. This seat will either be the 21st or 22nd seat. It is a majority-making seat, and come budget time, as the state senator from Fredericksburg, we can ensure that there is funding for our roads from Virginia through Smart Scale in order to pass a budget. I agree with what Joel said, that we need to work to reform our Crawford laws so that we're getting more money from developers, so that we have a way to fix our roads and ensure that these problems don't crop up again. But right now we are kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I do think that reforming Crawford laws is going to be quite difficult. considering the considerable influence that developers and their lobbyists have in Richmond. What we can do, though, like I said, is come budget time, pitch a fit unless they throw in some more money for Fredericksburg. They have no problem throwing in money for road projects up north or down south, and I think that they need to put some money right here because this is where the traffic stops. Most of us live part-time on 95 getting to and from work. And so as the next senator for Fredericksburg, come budget time, you know I'm going to be fighting for more road funding.
Yeah, my second address used to be I-95. Usually in the 2-hour chunk between Gordon and Dale City. I know that road so well, I can actually go down it and say, okay, it's going to slow for about 5 minutes because of the merge lane here, but don't worry, we're moving again. And there's the left lane closed, we're going to be an hour late, just call ahead. Yeah, it's more of a reality than the humor that's on. But you can't talk transportation without talking about bridges. And maybe if you lived out in Arizona, maybe not so much. They have washes out there, where occasionally the water flows. Are you in favor of another access bridge across the Rappahannock River? Do you have any thoughts about where it should be located? And how would you work with another county that has opposed this particular move? This is also going to be in your district.
Yeah, no, right?
Well, that's a softball question.
This is not a softball group, as you know.
No, it's not. No, I definitely, having commuted through the region for, well, almost a decade now, I definitely support another river crossing. I think that it makes perfect sense to have another river crossing up near Celebrate, Virginia, so that we can ease congestion on 17. I don't know about you, but every morning when I'm coming down Butler Road to get on Route 1 to go up, I often find myself bottlenecked because there's traffic coming to or from Hartwood. So I think another river crossing would ease some of that congestion, particularly our trucks that are coming off I-81 and other interstates, getting onto 17 and coming into the Fredericksburg region. I think that, well, there's a couple things. We need to obviously get a few more Democrats elected on the Spotsylvania Board of Supervisors, and I've been proud to recruit some of them and to get them their signatures and to support them as part of this campaign. But I also think we need to work with our environmental community. I know that the Friends of the Rappahannock and other environmental groups are very concerned about what kind of disruption another bridge crossing could bring. And I think we need to bring everybody to the table and we need to reason together because it's in the best interests of our community to do this. We can do it. It's going to take conversation. It'll be tough. It's not going to happen overnight. But I think the role of the next state senator is to be facilitator. These local officials need to make this decision. We facilitate the conversations. We get the funding from Richmond. We work with our federal counterparts like Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger and President Joe Biden, and we get it done.
These forums are relatively straightforward, is what he said. You know, the reality is that, you know, Ben and I have different backgrounds and we have different lenses through which we, you know, view life. And for me, bridges are certainly something that aid in the economy of Virginia, ease the transportation congestion. It is something that we can work with our environmental, having an environmental conscience about how we protect our rivers. I do think also that it's a matter of national security. In many ways, our bridges are very vulnerable, and the two bridges that we have, if there were a diabolical instance, you could shut down the entire East Coast in our backyard. So we need additional bridges to ensure that our commerce can continue, that our flow of traffic and folks who just want to use the interstate have access to it. That's the lens that I look through. I absolutely agree that we need a third bridge. I know there's 5 sites right now that we're currently looking at. I think that as the next state senator, having a voice at that table to determine where it's going to go, because it's going to end up in our backyard, gives us a very loud voice at the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger is a member of the House Agricultural Committee and has placed a lot of emphasis in her job representing this area on rural community economic development. As a state senator, your job is to represent the entire state. What would you do to support rural economic development?
I will tell you that Virginia's number one economy is agriculture, and that's what's driving Virginia. But what's also driving opportunities for workers coming off of those farms is the expansion of broadband. In my role at Stafford Economic Development Authority, we were able to work with Abigail Spanberger to obtain additional funding where we've expanded broadband to 96% of the residents in Stafford County. One of the first things I would do is, for the entire region, expand broadband. Broadband allows not only for greater educational opportunities for our students in our public schools, but it also allows for individuals who want to live in those rural areas should be able to have access to some of the highest paying jobs in our nation. Being able to work from your home or Class A office space in your area also encourages and fosters restaurant and retail growth because those individuals who have well-paying jobs who are still living in their town, they're now using those amenities at the local level. This is the quickest way to expanding rural economic development. We've seen manufacturing jobs leaving Virginia. We've seen agricultural jobs. Small farms are being consumed into large monopolies. We need to provide our citizens in our more rural areas with access to the 21st century economy, and the best way to do that is through broadband.
Our region is home to some amazing small family farms. I know that there's one right up here in Falmouth, the C&T farm. I was talking to the owner the other day at the Fredericksburg Farmers Market, and she was sharing some stories. She was telling me that one of the largest drivers of cost for her and her family is inflation. They are getting crushed by gas prices. They're getting crushed by the cost of feed for their animals. They're getting crushed by the cost of lumber. And so I think one of the things that we can do is provide subsidies and credits to our family farmers. Family farms, from my perspective, is about national security, it's about economic viability, it's about making sure that Virginia is competitive and that we have stable food sources. I also believe that we should invest in incentives for the next generation. Right now what we're seeing is that our family farmers are getting older and they're looking for places to go. They want to retire, they want to literally sell the farm, not figuratively. And we don't really have a process in place to make it so that they can sell the farm to the next generation of farmers. I support community, that's why I'm emphasizing community land trusts as part of affordable housing. We need to create pathways for these family farms to be sold to young farmers looking to be the next generation of food providers. It's part of our food security, it's part of our economic security, and it's part of our resiliency. I think a big thing that we can do to make sure that family farms are profitable is make sure that our school systems are purchasing their goods, their foods from family farms, that our food is sustainably sourced, and that it's local. I think Joel is absolutely right. We need to support agriculture because it's our #1 industry, it's our #1 job creator, and it is one of the prides of Virginia.
Thank you very much. And it's not too surprising that the follow-up question this individual had was, what would you do to promote urban economic development? Because your district is both rural and urban. And I suspect some of the answers will be similar to what you just gave, others a bit different. Sure.
For over a decade now, I've supported the smart growth within our region. And I say smart growth because oftentimes we hear about unplanned growth. We don't want to be Fairfax. We need to be practical. There are people coming here because of what we offer. We offer good schools, good parks, beautiful properties, access to the outdoors. This is a wonderful district to be in, but people are coming. And so we can't just assume that because we're here that no one else wants to be here. So we need to make sure that we build a strong economy, but a planned economic development. So, for example, a Quiet Town Center in Stafford, closed. Movie theater in Stafford, closed. Spotsylvania Mall, closing, right? So we need to make sure that we're planning our developments to coexist with our economic development. We need to make sure that people have walkable space, that they can work during the day, they can walk to coffee, get dry cleaning, they can take care of their own personal needs, and then they don't need to get on the highway to go home. Urban developments will continue to grow here. We need to make sure that they are planned, that they are going to the localities that we want them to, the planning districts that we have designated. All of our supervisors in all of the counties have designated redistricting zones. We need to make sure that we're driving the economy, but we're doing it so in a way that is planned so that we don't just have a Fairfaxing of our district. We need to make sure that we have an organized, systematic process for where developments are going to go.
Thanks so much. So, small businesses are about 75% of the job creators in our district. I don't think that you can go anywhere in our region without encountering a small business owner. I am proud to serve on the Economic Vitality Committee for Fredericksburg Main Street, which is a group of small businesses whose sole purpose is to make sure that once you start a business here, that you can stay in business. What I've seen is that one of the largest cost drivers for our small businesses is healthcare, whether it's purchasing health insurance for themselves or for their workers. And so I've been proud to work with a group of small businesses to try to set up a healthcare co-op so that businesses can bargain with large insurance companies to purchase affordable health insurance for themselves and their families. Again, I also believe that we need to invest more in employee ownership. Like I mentioned with agricultural development, we do have a gray wave. A lot of small business owners have worked very hard over many years to build a business that works, something that's profitable. They have employees that they trust who have added value to their business. Creating a center for employee ownership, which is something that they have in North Carolina, it's something that they have in Missouri, it's something they have in Kansas, Kentucky, across the country, including Massachusetts. I know because my friend is the executive director of one. These centers for employee ownership create possibility for small business owners who are aging and want to sell their businesses to sell them to their employees so that we don't deal with the kind of mergers and consolidations, the kind of empty storefronts, the kind of closed signs that we're seeing all over the district. I don't know about you, but I'm getting sick and tired of seeing empty storefronts. I'm getting tired of driving by a quiet town center and seeing leveled earth. I'm getting tired of seeing strip malls on 17. I support small business in our region, and I want them to stay here. I want them to be profitable. Small business is the backbone of our economy. I will be the small business senator.
Thank you very much. The next question deals with felons' rights. What laws need to be passed, well, excuse me, maybe more on the line, should there be a lifelong ban on voting of people who have been convicted of a felony? And how should people regain their right to vote post-completion of their court-imposed sentences?
So, again, felon disenfranchisement, which is what we're talking about, is a Jim Crow relic that was designed to keep black voters off the ballot, or to keep them from voting, excuse me. And so what I support is a constitutional amendment to get rid of felon disenfranchisement in Virginia. I think that once you've served your time, you should have your voting rights restored automatically. We are a country based on rehabilitation, based on the principle of redemption. I don't think that our criminal code should be as punitive as it is, and I certainly don't believe it should be denying people the fundamental right to vote.
If you served your time and you're a non-violent criminal, then you should have automatic restoration of your rights. It's really that simple. Governor Youngkin's plan of creating a committee has done nothing but jeopardize that, creating a process without standards, without measurement, without a rubric of understanding what it would qualify for. We need to immediately do away with that. It's a legislative action that we can immediately enact. And I would say that, again, simply that if you committed to re-entering society and you want to be a productive citizen, you've served your time, that you should be afforded the right to vote.
Thank you very much. What are your thoughts on electric vehicle development and their use in Virginia, specifically providing charging stations?
I think electric vehicles are certainly something that everyone talks about for having a green energy, green solutions. It's friendlier on the environment. But the reality is that the technology still has a ways to go. The batteries, once they need to be replaced, need to be properly stored and taken care of and disposed of. We don't have that capability here in Virginia. Green energy also means that we have vehicles that are huge consumers of electricity. When you plug them into your home, the electricity is still coming from somewhere. So our friends over at Redco and are trying and Dominion are trying to figure out where do we have this energy to come from, right? How do we reinvent our infrastructure in order to accommodate all of these additional vehicles and these huge power consumers? So I'm all for having clean energy, clean cars, fuel efficiency. These are things that we absolutely must do, but we need to take the practical stance on how we're going to address that within our existing infrastructure. I think at the legislative level, we can reinvest in how we are generating power, where those power sources are coming from. We can revisit clean energy sources, solar, wind. These are things that we need to do. We need to be adding additional energy sources to our infrastructure. We also need to update our infrastructure power grid to accommodate all of these new demands. And we also need to be producing better batteries and better, more efficient technology so that not only are these devices longer lasting, but that we have the ability to properly dispose of them when they're no longer used.
I believe that Virginia can be a leader in the green economy. I obviously support research and development into making electric vehicles more efficient. I think that what Governor Youngkin did, which was denying a Ford plant to build electric vehicle batteries in Southside Virginia, was absolutely deplorable. It denied our Commonwealth thousands of jobs because of his ideological war against China and his desire to one-up Ron DeSantis. I really think we should be building electric cars here in Virginia. I think we can be a leader on that. I would love to see those manufacturing jobs here. We have great public universities who could do the research that we need to make these electric vehicles even more efficient. As far as charging stations, I think that we need charging stations. There are people right now who own electric vehicles, and they should have access to charging stations so they can charge their vehicles and use them just like everybody else. We have gas stations on every corner. I don't see why we can't have electric charging stations as well. I just want to talk about just generally climate change is an existential threat. Our weather is getting worse. We're experiencing 1,000-year storms more frequently, 100-year storms. From a risk management perspective in the banking industry, we're seeing tremendous risk of flooding. We really need to do something proactive about climate change, and investing in electric vehicles is the way to go. I agree with Joel that we need to work with our electric companies to make sure that they have the resources that they need to meet the demand for electric vehicles, but I don't think that we should be shying away from them. I am all in on electric vehicles and on their research and development to make them more efficient.
Thank you, gentlemen. I've actually been debating whether to buy an electric car or not. I'm not usually a first adapter, at least I don't think it's that expensive. But I've been hanging around with a guy who does actually have one, and I just love the sound it doesn't make. Well, this is a good philosophical question, and it's appropriate for a democratic environment because you're going to be dealing with, in the fall, the campaign, the other side's going to talk a lot about fiscal responsibility. So what is your definition of fiscal responsibility, and how does it fit or square with democratic values?
My definition of fiscal responsibility is funding our obligations to each other, funding our public works, and making sure that we have enough resources to fund a strong social safety net. What we're seeing in Richmond right now is the underfunding of government. The problem I talked about earlier in this forum about the Virginia Employment Commission not being able to process claims is the result of years of disinvestment in our state government. Our state workers are overworked, they're asked to do too much, and they don't have the resources they need because we do not fund our government. I think a fiscally responsible approach to governance is one that makes sure that government can perform its basic functions, that ensures the wealthy, the well-connected, and our corporations pay their fair share, and ensures prosperity for all. And I think that fits well within the mainstream of the Democratic Party. I think we are the party of fiscal responsibility. We're not the party of debt ceiling battles. We're not the party of underfunding government and underfunding transportation and cutting our schools to the bone. We are the party of responsible management of government and responsible management of our obligations to each other. I don't think that fiscal responsibility and the Democratic platform are inimical at all. I think they're perfectly consistent with one another.
You asked me a philosophical question next to a guy who graduated with a philosophy degree. Thank you.
But they started with philosophy if you love.
Yeah, no, we're good. Thanks. So, one of the arguments that we've had in our household is about our children. And I'm the dad who feeds them Mountain Dew and feeds them pizza and lets them play video games until 2 in the morning. And then they're fighting with mom the next day when they have to get up and go to school. I think that's how the Republicans sort of treat the economy, right? They want to get mad at mom every morning because she makes them get up and be responsible and brush their teeth and put their clothes on and go to school. And we in the Democratic Party are very much in that vein. We are responsible for making sure that the bills get paid, right? That we have to be responsible. At the federal level, we see this every day where the Republicans are willing to drive off a financial cliff because they simply don't want to question Trump for 4 years and a 25% increase in our deficit, yet Joe Biden wants to spend some money on public services, and all of a sudden, where's all the money going? I think at the state level, we have to be fiscally responsible. We also need to be practical. I'm a small business owner, and I don't get everything that I want as a small business owner. I'd love to grow businesses. I'd love to do more things, but I have to do so within the practical means that I have. The government has gotten to a point where they're trying to legislate morality, and they're doing so by spending money on services and all of these different programs that have nothing more to do with a legislative body than trying to prevent people from voting and chastise people into certain categories. And we're using the government in a way to harm people, not to serve people. So I want to make sure that from a fiscal standpoint, we are being responsible, we are being practical, we are paying our bills. Thanks. She was waving stop buttons.
Yeah.
It's a hard stop. It's interesting. We've gone back 20 years ago. I didn't spend much time at the CVS prescription counter. I do now. And I can't help it. And I'm happy for that. I'm glad I live in a society and a culture that allows me to have access to sophisticated and valuable medical support. But that said, not everybody's in the same position as I am or others. And prescription costs are a major issue for many people in our community and in Virginia. What would you do as a state senator to bring down costs of prescription drugs?
So this is where the federal government must work with the pharmaceutical companies. We need to ensure that the price of something as simple as insulin, which has gone up, I think, 800% in profitability, is something that we legislatively can step in and reduce the cost of affordable healthcare medications and necessary drugs for all of our citizens. There needs to be some parity for those, so that Dave, who's clearly doing very well for himself and can afford all the medication that he needs, is not categorized as someone who is living in subsidized housing and has to choose between, do they pay the bus toll to get to work, or do they buy their prescription drugs? We need to stop using drugs as a method of profit for companies and as a tool for people that are in need of these services. We do have a great wave coming, and it's not just in agriculture, it's across the board. It's going to affect all of our lives because we're looking at mass retirements. We're looking at huge demand increase on Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. These are services that we need to continue to fund. We need to find methods in order to provide the funding for those. And I think prescription drugs and driving down the cost of those is something that, as a legislature, we actively need to be involved in.
I just want to, before I answer this question, give a shout out to Delegate Joshua Cole, who helped spearhead the price cap of insulin in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So because of Joshua, insulin is this past session, Senate Democrats introduced legislation to create a prescription drug affordability board. And what it would have done is reviewed the cost of high-risk drugs like insulin, like certain seizure medications, things that people require every year. My friend's cancer treatments that are $1,000 a pop. And they would have determined in coordination with experts whether those drugs were being charged at affordable rates. And if they weren't, they would introduce price caps. Now, as someone who has dedicated my entire life to studying the capitalist economy, price caps are kind of a scary thing. But I think that in the prescription drug market, where you have patents and you have a broken competitive system, we need to talk about price caps, particularly on life-saving medicine. Insulin should not cost $1,000, and in Virginia we capped it at $35. Cancer treatments should not cost thousands of dollars per treatment. I have multiple friends of mine right now, two very, very, very dear friends who are undergoing cancer treatment, and they're basically having to finance themselves to the hilt in order to stay alive. I don't believe in an advanced economy like this, in an economy rooted in justice, that you should have to decide between life or bankruptcy. Medical debt bankrupts too many Americans. It's time to bring it under control. It's time to bring costs under control. We need a prescription drug affordability board in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we will get it if elected in the Senate, and we will get it if we send Joshua to the House of Delegates.
I like that conclusion. I agree. Joshua Cole, House of Delegates. Oops, I shouldn't be talking like that. I'm the moderator. Yeah. I can say no about that. There were several questions submitted dealing with the LGBTQ community. And I was trying to figure out a way to put them all into one question. And it really comes down to what rights would you, as a state senator, what rights would you try to enshrine in protection of the LGBT community? And I'd also like to focus that not only on adults, but also on children and children in schools. So it's a broad question. I'm trying to give you more time with the rules of us.
So, one of my proudest moments as chair of the Stafford County Democratic Committee was leading a bipartisan, broad coalition to protect the LGBTQ students and staff in our schools. It was one of the proudest moments. I can tell you it was one of the most harrowing. We spent months at school board meetings with children who were 13, 14, and 15 years old crying while adults were calling them subhuman, using their dead names and ridiculing them. Joshua was in the room too. It was heart-wrenching. I never want to go through that again. I don't think our community wants to go through that again. I don't think our Commonwealth wants to go through that again. And yet that's exactly what the Republicans want to do. Delegate Tara Durant introduced legislation that would have required teachers to notify parents if students expressed that they were transgender. That's serious stuff. If you live in a home that's not affirming, that's not welcoming, that can put your life in jeopardy. I think that we need to take politics out of this and just focus on humanity. We need to follow medical advice, particularly with students. We need to protect them from harm. addressing the specific question as state senator, I think that there's a lot we can do, but a lot of it is in the form of blocking. We have the Virginia Values Act, which we passed under a Democratic trifecta, prohibiting discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. We have a policy we have a law that was introduced by Senator Jennifer Boysko and signed by Ralph Northam that requires the Department of Education to create model policies protecting transgender students in our schools. So what we can do is enforce the laws on the books and prevent the Republicans, including Glenn Youngkin and his enablers in the General Assembly, from chipping away at any one of them. And I can tell you, I will use the moral authority of my office to let all LGBTQ residents in Senate District 27 know that I'm with them in this fight and that I will always be with them.
Ben's pretty good with that policy and the law, so well done. It's pretty simple for me. It's equality under the law, period. I don't care what you look like, where you come from. When I was in the Marines, I didn't ask the person in the foxhole with me where your orientation was and who you go home with and what, where you're from. I didn't care. All I knew is that we were all aiming in the same direction. And as Americans, that's what we need to be focused on. MAGA Republicans and the MAGA Republican Party, they are driving wedges in every area that they find a crack. And we need to oppose that in every way possible. LGBTQ, whether they're an adult, whether they're a student, they want the same thing that we all do. They just want to be treated safely, humanely, kindness, with empathy. Some of these kids, they don't even know what they're going through, much less how they're supposed to defend themselves against a society that attacks them on a regular basis. It's about basic human decency, and that's what we need to get back to. And if we need to legislate that, then I'm all for it. If we need to protest for that, I'm all for it. If we need to rally in the streets for that, I'm all for it. But like Ben, I would defend LGBTQ citizens to the hilt because they are citizens in our district, and I will treat them the same as I do anybody else. If they need support, if they need services, if they need our legislative action, I will be right there for them.
And we are coming up on our close. Just one more question I'd like to ask.
There's no intermission?
We do one after we're done. We get a little chance to make a closing remark. There were several questions that were submitted that dealt with education and race, namely how we teach about the history of race, race relations, discrimination, Civil Rights Act, Civil Rights Movement, and one question specifically dealing with CRT, something that I really didn't even know the meaning of until Governor Youngkin decided to kind of make it a campaign issue. So having said that, knowing the governor's position and the governor's policies, how do you view the team? Or better put, how would you like to see our schools address these issues, and how should our education be structured in raising the awareness of race in our society?
I said it earlier this evening, and I've said it many times on the campaign trail. Education is the key to an informed society, and an informed society leads to a strong democracy. We can't whitewash, quite literally, our history. Right? It's not pretty, but I would say, like politicians who are not perfect when we run for office, I would also say that our American democracy is an exercise, it's an experiment. We're working every day to make it better. What we can't do is pretend that we didn't make mistakes along the way. If we made mistakes, let's own those. Let's educate those that are coming after us, the next generation of citizens, on what those mistakes were to ensure that they never happen again. We can't do that if we pretend that the devastation to our Native Americans didn't happen. We can't do that if we pretend that segregation wasn't alive and well not even 50 years ago here in our own backyard. We need to make sure that the slave block that was on the corner in downtown Fredericksburg is not something that we try to dismiss and we try to pretend that it didn't happen. It absolutely did happen. And we need to own that, but we also need to make sure that our our children are educated, to understand that we're not perfect. We are infallible, but we can also do better.
So, I was very proud to lead the effort of a group of teachers, educators, and parents in fighting Glenn Youngkin's history SOL revisions, which do actually whitewash our history and teach our students developmentally inappropriate information. They learn about Brown versus Board of Education, but they also learn about massive resistance. And I think that what we need to do in our schools is to get back to teaching true history. The National Education Association did a poll of parents. These are just across the board, Republicans, Democrats, and Independents. And if you ask them, do you think we should get rid of teaching Martin Luther King in our schools? They say no. But that's what Youngkin and his ideologues want to do. You ask them, and these are Republicans too, if you want to get rid of teaching about the civil rights movement, and they say no. But that's what Youngkin wants to do. Teach about segregation, they think that we need to learn about it. But that's not what Glenn Youngkin wants to do. Glenn Youngkin is afraid about our true history. He's afraid for people to learn who we really are. He wants us stuck in yesteryear where everything was hunky-dory and slavery was just some inconvenient experience. It denies the dignity to the black folks who went through it, who were chattel slaves, who are the descendants of chattel slavery, and who were discriminated against during segregation, during Jim Crow, and during the civil rights movement. It denies the beauty of our country to see an entire movement rooted in wisdom, justice, and love rise up to fight for a better democracy. I think that we should teach true history in our public schools. On CRT, because I know that the Republicans like to scare people about it, I can tell you that I learned about CRT at Howard University School of Law. It's not taught in our public schools. I don't think that it's age appropriate for high schoolers. It's definitely age appropriate in college, but I think that Republicans are just using it to scare and divide us. And what they really want to try to do is eliminate the teaching of true history in this country, and that's not American.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. And this we managed to get through most of the questions tonight. And I think you did an able and impressive job in answering them. So personally, I'd like to say thank you. We did closing.
Yes, go ahead.
And whoever, I managed to lose the quarter I was lent. I haven't been their vending machine yet.
Well, I just want to thank the Falls Run Democratic Club, the Celebrate Action Network, David Kerr, for an amazing event this evening. This is a turnout election. We need to energize the Democratic base, and we need to persuade swing voters who are looking for us to articulate a clear, unified message. Over the course of my campaign, I've seen that happen. I have a volunteer right now who is writing postcards for me while undergoing cancer treatment. There's a gentleman who knocked his entire subdivision because he believes in our message. I have a Republican who's voting for the first time for a Democrat because she believes in my fight for public schools. We are building a broad campaign, including everyone, in a message of hope. I want Americans, particularly in our Senate district, to hope again, to dream again, to believe again. And we're seeing it happen day in, day out on the doors. I thank you very much for this event, for the spirited discussion. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for having me this evening. I've only been a politician now for about 9 weeks, so figuring this out. But I will tell you that the thing that I've heard over and over and over from door knocking, from meeting in people's living rooms, from being on their back porches, is that they want someone who's going to fight for them in Richmond. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to serve and represent all of you in Richmond in November. We must defeat the Republicans that are running against us. Make no mistake, we talk about this quite often, that this is the election of a lifetime. This is the most critical election in your lifetime. And this, in many ways, it very much is. We must defend a woman's right to choose. We must defend our public schools. We must maintain a strong economy. And we must do that with strong Democratic leadership in Richmond.